I say trust your plan and knowing what your body needs. You really have to put the blinders on. You can't be looking at what everyone else is doing because that might be what works for them, but maybe not for you. If you're a high volume athlete, you might keep loading and putting that volume in all week long. Those athletes who don't do a lot of volume look at that and they're like, oh shoot, should I be doing that? And that's where you put the blinders on and focus on yourself.
Welcome to the Low Tide Boyz, a SwimRun Podcast. I'm Chip.
And I'm Chris. This is episode 274 of the show. We're back with the third installment of our Fika with Coach. And by coach, we mean Coach Liz. Chipper's coach, also America's coach at this point. She's coaching America's swimrun coach. She's coaching a ton of swim runners. And we asked listeners and viewers of the show to submit their questions. So as usual, Chipper, I don't know about you, but this show is so self-serving.
A lot of great stuff. Yes, I try to refrain from making this my personal coaching session. We took some listener questions as well as diving into topics that we hear about a lot, from commenting on our Instagram, on a Strava post, or from a lot of the questions we get via email or whatever. And then, take it on which way. This time we focused. Attila Catalina is obviously coming up. We have SwimRun NC coming up very shortly as well. So it's kind of, there's a section around how do you think about tapering? What are some of the things that you want to be doing or not doing, and what that looks like for different types of athletes? So as usual, a little something for everybody in here. Always a nugget or two to pull out from every question. Always an insight, I find.
Seriously. And I think this one in particular, there's a lot of stuff where, swim runners or athletes that are going to be listening or viewing this. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you like, subscribe, do all that stuff, hit the bell button, whatever you're supposed to do. There's a lot of stuff you can apply right away, which is good. It's like, hey, you can listen to this or watch this and immediately go be like, okay, I'm going to incorporate this in my training. I'm going to think about this when I'm thinking about my swim sets or my hill workouts and things like that. So I think in that respect, you can start applying it to your swimrun practices and to your training, and can certainly help you for, as Chipper mentioned, SwimRun NC. The time this episode's released, it's going to be a few days afterwards.
Hopefully you're tapering already.
If it's Catalina, you're about a month away. Certainly a lot of great information for swim runners. And, as ever, thanks, Liz, for coming on and taking the time. Before we get to our Fika with Coach, we want to share some announcements. First off, SwimRun Bellingham is coming up. Bellingham Swim Run, I think it's what it's called, but whichever way you call it is totally fine.
June 1st.
It's June 1st in Bellingham, Washington. We did it last year, really loved it. And true to our mantra, which started last year, is we're trying to do every race that's in our time zone. This race certainly checks that box, and it's put on by a dear friend of ours, Brent Molesbury, and his wife, Annie. And if you want to save 15% off registration, Low Tide Boyz. That's the code with the Z.
We'll be there June 1st. We'll see you there racing that one just almost to Canada. Great race prep for Attila Whistler later in the summer, as well as Attila Orcas. A lot of similar vibes.
Those vibes are high.
We'll see you on Attila Catalina. We dropped 2 different leg-by-leg breakdown videos on our Instagram, so head on over there. We did a leg-by-leg breakdown for the World Series course and then one for the Sprint and Experience course, so you can kind of understand what each run segment, and it's a little bit of like 3 minutes each, so easy to digest. Go back and listen to the episode with Lars Finanger, the race director of Attila USA. Kind of gives a little bit, expands on a lot of what we're talking about. But if you're looking for the meat and potatoes and marking up your paddles, those Instagram videos that are also on our YouTube will be helpful for you.
If you haven't signed up for Catalina, they're like 99% sold out. Use the code LOWTIDE10 to save 10% off your registration for that race and any Attila USA race. We're going to be at a bunch of them. We hope to see you all there. They put on awesome events, and Catalina, the stoke level is so ridiculously high for that.
Definitely.
The nostalgia vibes are high. The stoke is high. It's going to be just an amazing swimrun weekend. So we hope to see you all there.
Absolutely. And without any further ado, let's pull up a chair, pull up a coffee and a Fika with Coach Liz, the third installment of Fika with Coach Liz.
We're back for Fika with Coach Liz, number 3. Can't believe it's the third one. Liz, how you doing?
Good.
It's all good. There's more information you can't see off screen, but the newest member of the elite fitness team of Batman's parents is getting a new member. How's all that going?
Team Batman's parents bringing in a little girl, Gildan, who already likes to swim run in the womb right now.
Nice.
She's about 33 weeks and she'll be here before we know it.
Yeah, and then the real adventure starts. A lot of fun too.
And
So,
she will also be making her appearance at Casco Bay,
oh,
Yes.
nice.
whether
Okay, there we
that's
go. All right, got
on
the
the
swim run
coaching side
schedule.
or
Yeah, the
yes.
swim run schedule planned for her.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll talk to Ark about, they have a Corp Junior. We'll have to do like the Corp
A
Baby,
onesie corp.
Yeah.
onesie Corp.
Built-in water jet for her.
It's going to be great. So for this edition, we polled the audience for some questions. And I think Jacob came up with a good question, which might be a good jumping off point, which is why should swim runners or why do swim runners need to do speed work? I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that aspect of training for swim run?
Yeah. So I think this question really stems because swim run is such a strength specific race. We have lots of hills, they're long duration, so it's like, why am I doing all this speed work? And so there's the obvious answer of like increasing your VO2 max and like helping the body adapt to a new training stimulus. That's always going to make you a better athlete. But particularly in leading up to races, you really want to start to like fine tune those paces as well as just the speed in general. Think about the beginning of a race. Some people know they're going to go out hard to get to that front of the race. But how hard is too hard? That's going to be totally up to what you've trained. If you're comfortable at this pace, then you know I can sustain this, or you might know this is a little too hot. We need to pull this back. And it goes for both you and your partner. A lot of swim runners are very good strength-based athletes. We're good at doing the hills, we're good at being steady endurance pace athletes. But those VO2 max or tempo, threshold, stimulus efforts, whatever you want to call them, they're ultimately going to increase your aerobic capacity so that you can perform well and continue those faster paces for longer.
And then you're not avoiding endurance work either. That's still happening within the training cycle, but it's layering on shorter, quicker, punchier threshold tempo type sessions, whether in the pool or out in your runs. I think that's a good distinction to make. You're not saying don't do any endurance and only do speed. It's like add speed to what you're doing to help feel where you're at.
It does go both sports, swim and run. You got to incorporate that speed. Like it's going to make you feel better and get the most out of your workouts. I've found a lot of the athletes that are racing swim run right now are missing that little speed component, and I think it might actually help them become a more confident athlete by incorporating those little efforts. And like we're talking, even 30 seconds a couple times in a endurance run can really help that stimulus to help the legs turn over. If you're in the pool, we've talked about this before, a couple 25s, hard effort kind of just like gets the engines going. That's going to make the athlete not only feel stronger and gain fitness, but then show up on race day and realize they can hold these specific paces and not freak out. You want to feel confident in your abilities.
Yeah, and I think this is a point where it's easy to evolve into kind of like magical thinking, right? Where it's like, okay, I haven't done any speed work and I'm going to show up at this race and I've somehow managed to pull something out of my butt that I haven't done in training. And I think one way to tone down the magical thinking is to actually have done the work and the speed work. I know we felt it on both of our Up to Love builds. There was huge sections where we're at the track once a week and just kind of finding that running economy and working on those gears. And when we started working with a coach, a lot of my swimming was just like get in there and bang out yards, but it was less about finding your zones and swimming at different paces and kind of like, blowing it out every once in a while and seeing what's going on. I'm curious, Liz, where in your training cycle does it make sense to incorporate the speed work? And how do you think about how soon out of a race should you try not to get hurt or preventing people from making silly, bad decisions?
Yeah. So I think speed work comes in two forms. At the beginning of a season, you're going to see it as like strides when you're running or 25s fast in the pool. And then you think about that as building throughout your season. And maybe you haven't been doing any speed at all. So it's awesome. Start incorporating some strides now and build on that. Then we're moving into the bulk of your training sessions, which probably started with a lot of hill reps to build strength. Now we're getting closer to that race pace phase. So you're going to start maybe hitting the track. You can run these paces on the road. It doesn't always have to be on like a flat road track. Even hills sprints can be this same kind of stimulus as a speed workout. So that's a good thing to remember. It's almost April, and we've got race season here, which I'm super excited about. I can't believe it's already
Same.
here. 4 weeks out is a great time to start incorporating longer speed work intervals. This could come in minute intervals up to maybe 5 to 8 minutes, depending on how much you've been building up to this. And that stimulus is really going to transfer over. But as you get closer to the race, say 2 weeks out, you start to shorten the reps. You might think of it as 4 by 2 minutes, like 2 weeks out. A week out, you just do 5 by 1 minute and a couple 60-second or 30-second sprints. You've increased the load, and now you're going to bring the load down to help you start tapering for that race. You're sharpening is what they like to call it.
Sharpening.
You got to sharpen that rusty machete.
Rusty. Yes, absolutely. Chris, going back to a point that you made around gears, I think that's something that we have experienced as we've evolved our training. When you're into this endurance long zone two, you don't feel like you have the ability to speed up or do a faster thing or even come back a little bit. And I think swim run's really suited to have a really good understanding of, if you kind of think of them from zones, yes, there's 5 zones, but 3 to 5 gears about like, hey, this is all day, little bit sportier. This is like a effort. I'm trying to pass somebody sort of thing. But I do feel like the speed and having those higher intensity really helps shape those gears, at least for myself. When I'm doing a run, I now know I'm in that 3-4 range, and that translates really well to swim run racing because there is so much variability. Coming out of a swim, you might charge up that hill and okay, you're spiking up into you're using one of those different gears. And if you're just kind of zone two everything, you're not really gonna have that ability. And I think the spikes you get will it feels like you might burn more matches to get those spikes because you don't really have the variability in your training. Is that right, Liz?
Yeah,
Or did I make all that up?
I find this even for myself as an athlete. Being pregnant's been a little different, but while I was still running, I did try to do strides once a week. And it was just that little stimulus. My body would remember, oh, this is what 7-minute pace feels like, even though I might be running 8:30s or 9s. If you let that go and don't do it for a while, it feels way harder than it should when you come back to doing those. So definitely encourage athletes, like, let's start doing them now, once a week. Even if
Yeah.
it's new and leading up to race day, I think it might still benefit your race day 3 or 4 weeks out right now.
Yeah, and even if the run is supposed to be an hour on the easy side, having a few 30-second kind of spikes in there won't take your run from a chill zone 2 run to some sort of
Right.
tempo or threshold. It just provides that little stimulus to remind the body what's
Mhm.
going on and not to forget about that. But overall, it's not incredibly taxing on your body.
Right. And you can do those 2 ways. Like you can do them during the run. Every 10 minutes you do one stride or whatever, or you can just do your whole endurance run and then when you're done in the parking lot, run a couple back and forths. And then you're not really messing up your heart rate zone 2 run or whatever.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's always about the average when you're doing a zone 2 run or an endurance run. As long as you're keeping it relatively relaxed and easy, then a few pickups is fine. It's just like terrain. If you run up a little hill, your heart rate's going to go up just a little bit. Don't get too psychoanalysts on it.
Yeah.
One thing you mentioned, and I know this is another question we got from folks, is how do you taper for a swim run? This dovetails into that conversation. If you're doing the World Series distance, the longer the race, the more important nailing your taper is versus if it's something shorter. But I guess it also depends on your level of fitness. So if your
Yeah.
fitness is experience level, then your taper is still going to be important based on what you're calibrated at. How do you think about tapering for swimrun events?
Yeah, it depends on the athlete's training load leading into the race, regardless of what that training load looks like. If it's a long distance like the full distance at Catalina or something, we're looking at least kind of like 2 weeks out where you're still doing work, but you're starting to bring things back and sharpening. Maybe your peak week was 3 or 4 weeks out and you did a 3 or 4 hour run. 2 weeks out, you might be looking at more like just 2 hours, but you're going to do 10 by 30 seconds in the middle of that, or one 20-minute sustained climb to stimulate that Catalina big long climb. Overall, the volume you're doing is much less than it was 2 weeks ago, but it's still enough to prepare you. I think it's a great time to start doing some swim run sessions. If you don't have access to open water where you can swim run, it's fine to just do a 5K in the morning, straight to the pool. Then when you get out of the pool, you bust it out for another 5K afterwards. You're still getting that volume, and then you're still practicing the transitions. You've got to practice fueling throughout that swim run, and you can practice your gear too. Now, you might not want to swim in a chlorinated pool with your swim run suit on. You can rinse it out if you want. You can at least have your gear around you and recognize, okay, this is what I would need to make these transitions. Just being mindful of it, thinking about it. And I think honestly, almost the fueling is the more important part. So now, as we're leading into race week, I find athletes tend to do too much. A higher level athlete, it is really good to push the front end of race week. Monday's a rest day or active recovery day. Tuesday, you do a big swim run session, probably not more than 90 minutes. Wednesday, you can throw a little intensity into your run or whatever it is. Thursday, Friday, depending on if you're racing Saturday or Sunday, you bring those down more to a 2K swim. If you usually swim 3 or 4K, if 2K is your max, maybe just a 1K swim, but include some 25 pickups, some longer sustained efforts too, but mostly just easy. You're basically just moving your body and reminding yourself that you've already done the work. This is not the time to keep trying to improve your fitness or anything like that. Some athletes like to take the day off before the race or maybe 2 or 3 days out so that you can move your body a little bit before. It's totally personal. And so with my athletes, especially if it's our first taper together, I try to give them notes that you can move this around if you need a rest day. I can only give guidance that I think might work. You have to listen to your body. If you're tired, rest, eat some carbs, hydrate, and get extra sleep. And the next day, do your session, move your body, just get all those, like, anything that's scaring you about the race. Sometimes during race week, you're actually more nervous for the race, and movement is really key. But just remind yourself, don't go crazy now. 20, 30-minute swim, that's all we need now. We don't need to be doing some big, long session.
Let me ask you about that, Liz, because certainly
Yeah.
I've been guilty of this in the past where my old coach used to call this FBT, fear-based training, where you're like, oh my God, I don't think I'm prepared for this. So I got to bust out some 4 hour swim run to just make sure I got it in the bank. I'm sure I'm not the only person who's engaged in fear-based training. What do you tell your athletes to just kind of like reassure them, like, the hay's in the barn, trust the process? How do you keep people from engaging in magical thinking?
I mean, sometimes I can't keep them from engaging in
Fair enough.
all the
Present
fun.
company excluded, I hope.
Yeah, it is supposed to be fun. If you did a 90-minute swim run 2 days before the race, I'm not going to kill you, but be mindful of what you did. But yeah, otherwise, I say, like, trust your plan and knowing what your body needs. And so you really have to put the blinders on. You can't be looking at what everyone else is doing because that might be what works for them, but maybe not for you. If you're a high volume athlete, you might keep loading and putting that volume in all week long. Those athletes who don't do a lot of volume, they look at that and they're like, oh shoot, should I be doing that? And that's where you put the blinders on and focus on yourself.
Yeah, that's good advice for sure. We're talking about swim run type workouts. These swim runs are in really cool places like Catalina or Orcas Island. How did you advise outside of the workout? Like, I'm not doing a run today, but we went on a 2 hour hike up Mount Constitution because we're in Orcas Island and the race is tomorrow. I'm
Right.
sure that still comes into play. How do you think about that nervous energy before? And I'm like, let's walk around Casco, downtown Portland, Maine. It's such a cool thing, but that's also time on the leg. So how do you kind of think about that
Yep.
sort of stuff? I think I have
Yeah.
room for improvement.
I mean, we're all kind of guilty of it. Like I said, we're only human. We want to have fun with this sport. I can't scold you for going out to Uto and doing all of Uto the day before the world champs or something like that. Personally, I would just be very mindful of how this feels on my body. If it feels like I'm moving and it feels good to be out here, it's kind of distracting me from being nervous, then it's probably a good thing, to be honest. And then making sure you're fueling and hydrating on top of whatever you decide your activities are going to be. So you decide you want to go on a 2 hour hike, that's fine. Just make sure you have time to sit down in the evening and have a good dinner, foam roll, and hydrate, and try not to think about it impacting your race. If you get up the next day and you feel really tired from what you did, then lesson learned.
Noted.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. I love how these questions are all weaving in on each other. We had a question from a listener of when's the appropriate time to Fika? It's like before, after.
Hmm.
He forgot to mention during, which if you're doing the World Championship, plenty of opportunities to
It'll
get your
happen.
Fika on. How do you think about stuff like that? We were just talking about you're in a cool place, you're in Casco Bay, you got to get that lobster roll. If you're there, you might as well enjoy the experience. Do you think people should save their Fika-ness or pastry sweet treats till after? If you were coaching us, when would you tell us to deploy the strategy?
Well, when it comes to Fika, I'm all about it. I think before, during, and after for sure. As long as you don't have some kind of GI intolerance to the amount of sugar or gluten that you're about to inhale, I'm all about it. The one thing I would be hesitant with an athlete if they do have gut problems during races and they know that their food fuel leading up to the races does impact them, then that's the one time where I might say, I think Fika is totally safe. I'm thinking more like if they want to go have a hot spicy meal or something the night before, that's when you're really testing the waters. If you do have GI intolerance problems, some of the best ways to troubleshoot this is to have a very basic and normal, almost boring diet 2 to 3 days leading
Mm.
into the race. White pastas, rice, white bread, things that don't really bother you, and just sticking to that. This is why, in my mind, having a fika is still like carbs and white bread. So I think it's safe. If you're having trouble,
Yes, it,
that's a great way to load up. So why not?
yeah.
Sure.
And we're talking about high volume athletes. That's Chris and I. We're high volume, so then we don't have to taper as hard. We can just roll
Yeah,
right into it.
absolutely.
Uh,
Ottawa is also the Fika World Championship, but we're training for that as well. We're training to break bread and break Fika with multiple people and have multiple Fikas a day before the race and
Mhm.
after. It's just part of our training.
Yeah,
we get warning messages from fans.
I find the swim run community is pretty good about fueling and recognizing that food is fuel. You don't have to do this crazy hard workout to enjoy this awesome fika. Whereas the running world and triathlon world, it's slower moving in that direction. It's good to have a healthy relationship with food. I encourage you, if you want to eat it, then eat it. If it makes you feel good or doesn't make you feel good, those are things to personally just like reflect on before a race and see maybe I should wait to eat this until after the race. But if it doesn't usually impact you, then it's usually fine.
In terms of caffeine and coffee, I always try to kind of stay within my normal, like, same as you don't try a new kit or you're not busting out a new shoes on race day, keep your diet relatively the same guidelines. So, hey, if I'm not having a coffee after noon or whatever rules or, guidelines you have set up for yourself, like still abide by those is sort of the approach that you wouldn't want to have a hard time going to bed the night before and not getting as sound a sleep as normal.
Yeah,
That'd be a
canal
problem.
bars.
Yeah.
Yeah, the caffeine.
Got a lot of
Oh,
cardamom in the system.
that reminds me too of like a lot of these races are just in really cool places, and sometimes to relax, you want to have a beer, you want to have a wine, like you're out with your friends. If you tolerate it and it makes you relax a little bit, like me personally, I wouldn't do it because I know that it would impact my sleep, but somebody else might want to have a beer and enjoy it, not to scold yourself for having this beer or whatever it is. Maybe just don't have too many.
Yeah, I
Yeah, a
think that
little
advice
bit of
is just so
grace.
well taken. You got to give yourself some grace. There's this parable of don't get hit by the second arrow, right? First arrow is like, oh, this might happen. Then the second, you feel bad about it. It's almost like, hey, you're trying to have a good time, enjoy yourself. If you have a beer or wine with dinner, it might be a good thing to keep your normal
Right.
routine before a race. It's familiar and makes you feel warm and fuzzy or whatever it does for you. But if that isn't the normal, yeah, don't go out partying. Like don't hit up Chipotle, have a bunch of beers, and then show up at race day like all screwed up because it's just it's like great self-sabotage if you want
Yeah.
that. But if you trying to have a good race experience, just trying to keep it as chill and as like keep it breezy.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember in your previous podcast with Andy, he was talking about the caffeine thing and how it's evolved. And I remember even when I was racing professionally, like I tried the whole limit caffeine up to the race because then I could have it race morning and like see if it really impacts me. And I never really like felt different other than that I had a headache all week because I just wanted to have a cup of coffee.
It's no
So
good.
I'm all about just like keep it simple, keep it pretty normal to whatever your routine is, and you'll probably feel good on race day.
Yeah. Keep it normal. Just don't do anything too outside of the norms. Just keep it consistent. It feels like we're overthinking a lot of stuff about do I need to be sleeping 7 hours or 7 hours and 45 minutes? It's like just sleep good so you
Yeah,
feel rested. You don't need to sweat the details. Just keep it between the lines.
Yeah,
yeah,
seriously, don't overload yourself with all this input. It's like, oh, I've never done this before a race, but maybe this will be the huge unlock. Well, actually, if you've never done it before a race, maybe you just shouldn't do it. It's almost like engaging in magical thinking to be like, oh, I'm going to try bicarb because I've heard all these great things, but you've never used it before. And then what ends up happening, you just end up pooping your pants, pooping your
Yeah.
suit on
Gonna
race
mess your
morning,
suit
right?
up.
I think we're harping on it because we've all experienced it and it's just super important. But like not trying anything new on race day. It's more about just trying to make sure you're in a good headspace so you're not second guessing yourself, having second thoughts about one thing or another, but mostly just showing up to the race in like the best frame of mind. And if that
mhm,
means like, hey, you usually have a cheeseburger and fries the night before a race and that's what works for you,
Shoot
maybe
your
that's
shot.
not globally the best thing you should do, but if that's what works for you, like, I don't know, do it.
have you tried bicarb?
No, I've been getting ads for it.
Too
I
expensive?
mean, what are we going to do with bicarb? Like, we're not trying to run 208 or
Chris,
something.
we're a couple thoroughbred racehorses here. We got to get some bicarbonate.
I have enough carbs in my system.
Yeah, stick to the carbs.
I have not tried it either, but I've been doing some research on it, and it does seem like it could help endurance athletes. To an extent, there's been some ultra trail runners that have been experimenting with it, and who knows if it's just placebo because they do it in their training on their hard session days, so they replicate that by doing it in the morning of the race. Is it still really in your system 50 miles into your 100 mile? Obviously, it's shown great research for very short and anaerobic efforts like sprinters and things like that, but the research doesn't really show sprinters using it yet, which is kind of bizarre, even though that's where it should impact you the most. Or the track and field people are just not telling us that they're using it.
It's possible. It's very possible.
Yeah.
I mean, and
Well, we
so
have,
much of that is like, I mean, as we alluded to Andy Blow conversation from a few weeks ago, everyone's trying to find the magic bullet. What happened to like beet juice? Are people still drinking beet juice,
Hmm.
and worrying
Some
about their
ketone.
nitrites or whatever? People are trying to find this edge while neglecting the 80% or nail the
yeah,
basics. Once you've really nailed all that stuff, then maybe bicarb or one of these other things works. Start with making sure you're hitting your carb total that you're trying to achieve for an
Mhm.
hour before worrying about bicarbs.
100%.
nice. We have, I've been, Liz and I, we've been working together for a bit now. And one thing that I've really been happy with is all the strength training that I've been receiving and then actually doing it, which is probably the hardest part. I feel like coming off the back of the 50K that we had, I felt like it was really showing there later in the race. Like I had stronger muscular endurance. I know for your athletes, Liz, strength is part of the system. You're not just prescribing swims and runs. There's strength, stretching, mobility, flexibility type stuff as well. How do you think about for swim runners, and maybe what are some of your favorite movements or exercises for folks looking to get started with
Mhm.
strength training for swim run?
Yeah, if you're time limited and you're starting to introduce strength into your routine, try and pick 3 to 5 movements that focus on one aspect of your body for each. If you want to focus on the glutes, do some squats. If you want to focus on the quads, do some walking lunges. Doing lots of core work, obviously very important with the swimming, with the pull buoy, and keeping your legs anchored up. Lots of different core work. You could do planks, you could do side planks. When you're doing these, say you're doing your glutes, you're actually still activating your core too, because you're breathing through the movements. Regardless if you think, oh, I'm doing my planks right now because I want to work on my abs, you're actually utilizing your full body when you're doing any of these strength routines if you're mindful of how you're breathing and which muscles you're activating. Then we move up to the arms and the shoulders where we're swimming a lot with all these paddles. I've talked about how we should build appropriately with paddle usage. That could be one way of incorporating strength into your swim sets. You can do basic movements in the gym even with just a band and tie it to the wall and do some ins and outs like you're opening the door. That's going to work on the rotator cuff, and you can pull it up and pull the arm through as if you were making a strength movement. Think about in COVID when all the pools closed, if you guys tied up bands to the wall and tried
Oh
to
yeah.
do some swimming.
Hmm.
There's nothing
Guilty.
wrong with doing that in the gym for 5 minutes, get the arms and the
Yeah. The only
lats
thing that's wrong
burning.
with just make sure it's properly attached. So you don't end up like a fail video where the thing
Did
hits you in the face.
that
We've all
happen to
seen
you?
it. Don't let that be you, people.
Yeah, fun.
Moneymaker.
So if you haven't been doing gym at all, maybe start with basic movements and build yourself up in weight. Start with body weight, move to a 10-pound kettlebell, eventually progressing as you go along. After you've done that, start to get heavier and then start to incorporate like plyometric type moves. So maybe you're doing that walking lunge, but you've turned it into a jumping lunge. And those kinds of things are going to benefit the trail running when you're stepping over all these logs and rocks and trying to kind of like get the agility component to that. And so, as Chipper, you were kind of alluding to, like your strength routines have changed depending on where you're at in your training season. And so now, since we're closer to race season, we are more focused on plyometric type of strength and getting him ready to go and fired up, those muscles activated at a higher repetition load. A few months ago, we were hitting the heavy load to gear him up for running 5, 6 hours in the mountains.
And in terms of frequency, how often would you typically put this in your athletes' calendars? Twice a week, 3 times every day? What?
Yeah,
I'm sure it's individual to the race and ability.
ideally, we're in the gym 2 times a week. Most athletes, it's only 1 time a week, whether you're
Mm.
doing a high intensity training session for that one time and that's your strength session, that's fine. But try to find another time during the week where maybe do some mobility stretching and opening the hip flexors, or if you have tight obliques or shoulders, stretching that, using the hypervolt. You can do these sessions as much as you want. Ideally, at least 2, maybe one heavy,
Okay.
one light.
From my personal experience, I was one of these people like, oh, if I do weights, I have to trade off and not do a run. I want my run to go well. But I've been doing my strength before my runs, and I have found my runs are performing way better than before not even doing strength. It's a little bit like the body's warmed up, you're pretty activated. So when you hit that run and need to get those faster spikes at threshold limits, your body's already ready to go and you're plenty warmed up. So I've been finding a lot of benefit
Yeah,
of that.
that's
Plus, I would imagine there's probably like additional muscle endurance that you're building as well because there is some muscle fatigue already there on the run.
Yeah, there's a lot of research as to when do you do your strength sessions. Some athletes might do the runs in the morning and then go to the gym later. Or if you want to backload it, you do the run and go straight to the gym. Then the muscles are fatigued and you
Mm.
have to get them to stabilize and activate in a different manner. Vice versa, you do it before you go on the run. The running muscles are a little fatigued. Sometimes it can feel good, sometimes it can be like, oof, I did too much. Generally, I like to do my strength sessions on my hard days, particularly if it's a heavy strength session. If it's just a light active mobility kind of thing, you can do those on recovery days, whatever. But if you're doing like your long run or it's a key run workout day with hills, load up the strength and the run workout because then you're hitting a double whammy and the muscles are going to have to adapt to that.
Yeah, one thing you mentioned in passing, but I think probably is worth kind of highlighting is the idea of kind of like, what's your intention when you're going in there? You mentioned it's like, hey, this is to be strong at swim run. If you're going to the gym being like, I'm booty building right now, and all I care about is growing this booty, is that really going to prepare you for swim run? I mean, might prepare you for Instagram, but it's not preparing you for the demands of the race. Whenever I do strength, I'm always thinking, how is this benefiting the performance I'm trying to have, or how is this supporting what I'm trying to do? And certainly, I think you already kind of alluded to that, but I'm curious if you think that's helpful in terms of how you set your intention for why you're doing strength anyway, especially if it isn't something that comes natural. For a lot of folks, that's probably the first thing to drop. They'll get their swims and runs in, but the strength, it's like, oh, I got a meeting.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Curious how you think about that.
If you're one of my athletes, you see in the training plan where I'm strategically putting your strength. I try to work with my athletes. It's not always perfect. If you have time to do it on Thursday and that's just the day that works, then that's what we're going to make work. Strategically aligning it with those bigger days, or you have a recovery day tomorrow. So if you do happen to get too sore and you're worried about missing that run, at least you have the recovery day. Whole intention behind the workout. Every workout you do should always have an intention, even if it's easy recovery run. That's your intention. Go
Yeah.
as slow as possible to make sure you're recovered for the next big day.
Yeah, going back to the taper week stuff, I feel like the gym, you really got to have the blinders on because there's all sorts of people doing different things. If you're looking at this person, oh, they're doing this much weight, just stick to your own shit.
Hmm.
Don't worry about what everyone else is doing. They don't really care what you're doing either. That's probably advice
Yeah,
well taken
I
from the
think to take that advice to the next level, if you know that you're susceptible to this and start looking over your shoulder, maybe don't hang out on Strava, because at
Right.
Strava, there's always someone busting some crazy workout on a Thursday. You're like, oh, damn, maybe I should be doing that. Probably not. You should probably do the
Yeah.
opposite of whatever random people are doing on Strava. If that's messing with your chi, just block it out. Don't let that
Hmm.
affect you. Trust the process, trust your coach, trust what you're already been doing. And again, like don't try to reinvent the wheel just because some dude's doing booty blaster exercise.
This is strength training specific in the gym workouts. Don't forget
Yeah.
that you can also do a lot of strength training workouts outside of the gym
Yeah.
that are sports specific. So you've got the paddles in the pool, the hills on the run. Something I've incorporated into some of my athletes' plans. Lots of stair stepper or uphill treadmill, either long runs or post swim. It's a different stimulus to get that extra vertical challenge that a lot of these courses are challenging us with in the swim run season this year. And so we mentioned the strength training day. I've been playing around with this one. I do like a 25-minute stair stepper, and then we do our strength training circuit and get back on the stair stepper while our legs are fatigued and double time. It's a great workout, and it's not swimming or running, but you're getting a stimulus that is going to help you excel in races when you start to fatigue.
You
That
know
one.
what I love about strength training in general? You have a justified excuse to complain about how sore you are. That is the best type of complaining because the only way you can complain that way is by actually having done the work. That's a huge talking point in my household. Whoever has done Orange Theory or whatever it is like, you're sore. I'm like, yeah, complain all you want
Yeah.
because you've actually done the work.
My favorite excuse from any athlete is, oh, my butt's too sore. And that's a good excuse. I'm okay
Yeah.
with that one.
A lot of booty talk in this
Yeah, a lot of booties on the mind today. Speaking about sort of like, yeah, I think that good segue.
Speaking
You did
about
have a
booty.
bigger, yeah, you did have a bigger strength session. You are a little bit sore from your strength session and you're starting your run or your swim and you're not feeling like, hey, my buddy's back to 100 body battery or
Mhm.
whatever it is. How do you think about, would you want to like adjust based on soreness or is this good for you to flush the system? This isn't as specific to taper week or anything, but
Yeah.
you enter a session and you're fatigued, whether that be from weight training at the gym or a bigger run session. How do you think about training through fatigue?
Yeah, that's a really good question, especially when it comes to the run, because there is a risk of an injury if you are too fatigued or some muscle part is too strained from the gym. I think that you probably want to look at the hamstrings. If you're feeling like your hamstring might seize or snap, then you probably don't want to go hard in that session. You might want to shorten it. Definitely just keep it easy. If you're feeling like your glutes are a little sore, that's probably okay. Calves are a little bit sore, but any athlete who knows who they've been on the verge of breaking before, like you have this sense of like, oh, if I go any faster, it's not going to be good. So listen to your body when it comes to that. I can't tell you exactly like, oh, and then I tore my glute or something. We don't want that to happen, but you shouldn't be afraid to do strength training sessions just because you get sore. I know sometimes you do a bunch of squats, but then your adductors are really sore. For some athletes, that's like, oh, why is this sore? Does that mean I'm doing this exercise wrong? But maybe that is just a weakness on your body, and it is a good adaptation that your body's going to get used to. And you just need to give it the appropriate amount of rest to recover. And
Yeah,
then
no, I
it will
think,
adapt.
yeah,
Yeah.
thinking back to the period in my life where I was the fittest and able to do the most ridiculous stuff was when I was working with a coach, Nate Helming. Shout out. He doesn't listen to the show, but shout out to Nate Helming anyway.
Good.
It's been on the show, episode 18 or something like that. I'd be in the gym with him twice a week, and I've never been stronger. It'd be like we would do like an Ironman 70.3 on a Saturday or Sunday, and Tuesday back in the gym. It gives you a lot of buffer. Maybe you can push a little bit harder because you have the strength. You're crossing the finish line looking good instead of destroyed. It builds a lot of resiliency on top of your endurance. Even if you're sore, that's almost the point in training. It's not to feel great all the time. It's to
Hmm.
feel like you're doing work and you're loading your body up.
Yeah, very true. I think also, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, this is a strength-based sport. So being strong is the sole importance. I find like, especially as like an aging athlete, can't do as much volume as I used to, that it's almost more important than all those hours I used to do to just be strong. I trust when I show up on race day that I've done what my body can train for. It knows all those years of endurance events that it used to do. So I know that my strength going into this race actually is my strength behind all those squats I did in the gym.
I love that.
Noted. Nice. I feel like we really
Did we
touched
hit all
a
the
great
questions
variety.
that folks reached out?
We had the Fika question, we had the strength training question, we had our own
Taper
personal
question.
questions.
Oh yeah, I
Questions.
mean, we
What
joke that
questions
this
do I
show is
have
so self-serving to us, and I think no better example than Pico with
this
Coach.
episode?
But I'm super excited to see all the athletes get out there and race, and hopefully I'll find my start line closer to the end of the year. We'll be out there
Yeah.
cheering and hanging out. Can't wait to see all my athletes crush their goals this year too. I'm living vicariously through my athletes because I can't go to the races right now, but I get really excited when my athletes do well at their races.
Yeah,
I'm sure your
absolutely.
athletes are also excited when they do well at their races.
That's
Or
true.
Yes. It's a win-win situation.
Well, Liz, thank you so much for taking the time. Always a constant stream of knowledge bombs. Good luck with everything, and we'll see you out there at a race soon.
Thanks, guys.
That's it for this week's episode. Thanks so much for listening to the show. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave a rating or review, since that's the best way to help other people discover the show and the sport of swim run.
Check out our website, lowtideboys.com. That's boys with a Z, for swimrun resources, including gear guides, tips, how-to videos, and so much more. Make sure to check out our meme page at The Low Tide Boys on Instagram. If you have any questions or suggestions for the show, send us a DM or email us at lowtideboys@gmail.com.
We'd like to thank Riding Easy Records for our show music, and of course our wives for their support and tolerance of our swim run and other activities.
Finally, you can support our efforts on Patreon. Get out there and go for a swim.
Then a run,
And then a swim.
then another run.
then another swim,
then run some more
just keep going.
and fuel. Don't forget to fuel.